During Thanksgiving, my daughter stood up. "We decided to cut you out of this family." I laughed and gave her an envelope. "Here's something for all of you." When they opened and saw what I'd done, they knew their comfortable lives were over. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. If I cave today, I lose the last say over my own life. Frank's roses don't understand any of this. The morning he died, they were blowing open like little suns along the fence, yellow petals warm from the 74-degree of air. He was out there with his hat and his clippers, humming old Motown into the breeze. One minute, he was trimming a climber that refused to mind the boundary. The next, the world went quiet in a way that told me what I didn't want to know. I remember the sight of his favorite gloves lying palms up in the grass, as if they'd tried to catch him, and failed. The neighbors came. The sirens came. I stood on the patio with my hands in dish soap and watched a part of my history disappear into the back of an ambulance. At the funeral, I floated, accepting slices of casserole and the same soft sentences from people who cared but didn't quite know what to do with my sort of silence. Laura, my daughter, took the clipboard from the funeral director like a foreman on a job site and filled the air with competence. Her husband, Chris, managed relatives and parking like it was a corporate event. For a few days, I let myself be handled. It was easier than breathing. Then the house got on trial. "Mom," Laura said at my kitchen table where she used to do long division, "you can't keep this place by yourself. It isn't safe, and it just isn't practical." I looked around at the subway tile Frank and I chose in a weekend of bickering and laughter. He'd finagled the farmhouse sink in under budget. I'd picked a faucet that made him roll his eyes and then use it more than I did. Morning coffee had a spot on the island, a ring no lemon or polish could erase. "This is home," I said. "We built our life here." "It's too much," she insisted, gentle voice, firm plan. Chris slid a brochure across the table. Photos of folks with perfect posture in a pool, a knitting circle with 10 identical smiles. "Independent living," he said. "It has support services if you need them, plus social stuff. You'd have people your own age around." People my own age, like a category on a shelf. I wanted to say, my friends are the grocery clerk who slips me the good peaches and the librarian who saves me the newest historical mysteries. I wanted to say, my age lives on this floor, in these walls. We earned it one bill, one bruise, one miracle at a time. But grief makes you heavy, and heavy things are easy to push. I moved, 2 bedrooms in a beige complex that smells like carpet cleaner and new rules. The fitness center is a treadmill with a wobble. The pool is always under maintenance, and the bulletin board promises bingo like a cure. I tried to make it mine, hung a quilt, set out 3 framed photos, arranged the couch so sunlight still found my lap at 9:15 a.m. sharp. My dining table, survivor of every birthday from finger paint to champagne, looked gigantic and foolish in a space clearly designed to hold a folding number from a big box store. Laura and Chris carried my china to their basement like it was a favor. "You can visit it whenever," he said, joking. "Visit my own plates like they were doing time." I thanked them anyway because gratitude is muscle memory for mothers. The first call came on a Tuesday. "Mom," Laura's voice was taut like a string you don't dare pluck. "I hate to ask, we're having a cash flow hiccup. Chris's commission check is delayed, and our mortgage draft's tomorrow. Could you, just this once, spot us?" "What do you need?" My mouth answered before my mind did. It's astonishing how quickly your heart finds the old service door. 3,200. I transferred the money from the little desk by my apartment window where the radiator clicks like a nervous watch. Electronic banking, one modern trick I embraced because grief likes convenience. I pictured their white colonial with the black shutters and the hydrangeas, and imagined relief flooding their kitchen the moment the payment cleared. Relief is a mother's drug. I slept on it like it was medicine. The payback never came, but the asks kept coming, like junk mail with my name right. Car insurance, SAT prep for Sophie, orthodontist bills for Nate, the furnace, the dentist, the dog. Every call framed the need as temporary. Once this quarter wraps, Chris would say, when my territory settles. I told myself family helps family, and what was I holding money for now? Cruises? Singles mixers with cupcakes? A fancier beige? I wasn't counting, but my bank statements were. By Halloween, the total I'd sent them held more digits than I care to admit. I told myself stories while I transferred funds. This is love. This is what Frank would want. This is better than letting them fall. The stories worked right up until the afternoon that Sophie handed me my iPad to show me her homecoming photos and forgot to log out of her social media. I was trying to close the app when a photo snagged my eye. Chris and Laura at a restaurant where the napkins wear cufflinks. Champagne. Caption, celebrate the wins. Blessed. Blessed, I scrolled. A modest family dinner where entrees cost more than my monthly groceries. A weekend to decompress at a spa that appears in magazines. A small upgrade to a shiny car whose hood could double as a mirror. My coffee went cold while the thread of their curated life connected with the number in my banking app. It formed a knot I could no longer pretend was ribbon. I didn't call them. I called a lawyer. The office belonged to a man named Alan Mercer, mid-40s, sharp suit, eyes that actually looked where pain lives, leather chairs, diplomas stacked like brick, the faint smell of good paper. He shook my hand and said my name correctly, which is rarer than you'd expect. "How can I help, Mrs. Walker?" I told him about the funeral and the house and the beige, about the Tuesday calls and the just until promises, about the photos that turned my stomach. As I spoke, a strange sensation uncurled in me, something between shame and fury. He listened without the quick apologies people deploy when they need the air to be lighter. "What you're describing," he said at last, tapping a pen once, "is elder financial abuse." The words were clinical and hot at the same time. I flinched. "They're my family." "Family can be the vector," he said carefully. "Abuse often hides in the narrative of care. We'll document everything. Transfers, texts, posts. We'll build firewalls around your accounts. From there, you decide how far to pursue restitution. But the first urgent thing, stop the bleeding." I stared at the photographs on his wall. A sailboat, a courthouse, a kid drawing a turkey with their hand. "I don't want my daughter in handcuffs," I said. The sentence felt like I'd swallowed gravel. "Most people don't," he said. "But you do deserve safety, and you deserve to be the one who chooses what help looks like." He gave me a list, and work always helps me breathe. New bank at a new branch, new passwords that did not contain birthdays or pet names, a safe deposit box for documents that mattered. He was gentle with the stories, blunt with the numbers. "This pattern rarely fixes itself," he added, which is lawyer for, "Don't count on miracles that cost you everything." I had not cooked a real dinner since the funeral. That Saturday, I did. Pot roast the way Frank liked. Vegetables tucked around like a bed. I took the good dishes out of their padded sleeves and set them on my small table, because I am allowed happiness even when no one is watching. While the roast worked itself into tenderness, I highlighted bank statements. The total I'd sent Laura and Chris in 4 months made my hand shake. You don't realize how careful your life is until you see how quickly it can be spent. When Laura called that evening, I answered with my voice in neutral. "Hi, honey." "Hey, Mom." Cheerful but a little breathless, the way you sound when you're approaching a request. "Did you forget Sophie's car insurance?" "No, I didn't forget." A pause. "Could you send it tonight? It's due first thing." "I've been thinking you and Chris might try financial counseling," I said. "Lots of families swear by it. Budgeting help. A reset." Silence wobbled between us, then tightened. "We don't need counseling, Mom. We need a little help. Just until his commissions. It's been 4 months, I said softly. Her voice lost its frosting. So you're saying you won't help us? I'm saying you may need a more sustainable approach than asking your newly widowed mother to be your line of credit. She hung up on me. I stood in my little kitchen staring at the rectangle where the call had ended and realized I was shaking. Not from fear, though some of that was in the mix, but from the collision of clarity and love. Frank used to say my stubborn streak was a superpower. I didn't feel super. I felt like someone who'd locked a door for the first time and wasn't sure what would try the handle. Over the next weeks, Laura called less. When she did, her voice carried weather. Sophie's college apps. Nate's basketball fees. The furnace sounds weird. Each detail arrived like a snowflake meant to bury me slow. I practiced listening and saying, "I'm sorry," and then nothing else. Meanwhile, I sat with Alan in his office and learned terms I'd never planned to learn at my age. I learned how many seniors lose everything. He told me about an 82-year-old widow whose son forged her into a mortgage she didn't want. About a retired bus driver whose daughter-in-law added herself to accounts and then removed the money like taking a pan off the stove. Horror stories that left me both lucky and determined. Holiday season is a pressure point, Alan warned gently. Families gather, expectations sharpen. If someone plans to leverage sentiment, that's a common time. Leverage sentiment. I heard it like thunder in the next room. For 20 years, we hosted Thanksgiving. When the tradition shifted to Laura's house, I told myself that's how it should go. Just before the holiday, my phone lit up with "Mom, call when you can" texts, the kind that promise a conversation with a point. The point arrived one gray evening. "There's been restructuring," Laura said, voice frayed. "Chris's territory might be cut. Even if he keeps the job, income drops. We're behind on the mortgage." She drew a breath. A lot behind. I closed my eyes. In my head, I walked through their immaculate entryway, past the framed canvas prints of beach photos where you can't smell the sunscreen. How behind? 6 months, 7 maybe. But if we catch up, if we can show the bank we're current, they'll work with us. We can fix it. She named a number that felt like slamming into a wall. $25,000. They gave us 2 weeks. Then she added the dagger I didn't know I'd been bracing for. "Think about the kids, Mom. Uprooting Sophie in her junior year? Nate's team? We can't do that to them." I hung up and pressed my palm flat to the apartment window. Cold hummed through the glass into my bones. I thought of Frank, who worked overtime not because he loved overtime, but because he loved the quiet that paid-off bills brought to a home. I made tea strong enough to singe, sat at my small table and cried the way I hadn't since the day we folded the flag of our old life and put it in a drawer. Then I called Alan on his emergency line. "They've been missing payments," I told him, while telling me they needed help with current ones. He was silent for a beat. "That's fraud," he said. "It matters that you know that word." I did not sleep much, but I did something else. I pulled out a manila envelope and began to fill it. Transfers, screenshots, dates, my own notes in the margin where memory tries to hide. I added a short letter to myself on top. It read, "You are not an ATM. You are a person with boundaries. You are allowed to love without paying a bill to prove it." In the morning, I brewed coffee and watched how peaceful the sky looks when no one is asking you for anything. I called Laura back and said, "I need to think," which was true. And then I went to the bank and finished everything on Alan's list. I walked out with a new account that no one else could lean on, a key to a small metal box that held the paperwork of my life, and the kind of resolve that doesn't need witnesses. That night, the apartment felt less beige. It felt like mine. I set a plate on the table and sat down alone with my dinner in the envelope, its corners squared like a promise. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. That's enough to start a different story. The manila envelope lived on my dining table like a roommate. I wrote its name in neat block letters across the tab, evidence, and slid a pink index card inside the front sleeve that read, in my own handwriting, "When you forget why, open this." Inside, paper made a kind of spine for me, bank statements with yellow highlighting like warning tape, a printout of transfers with dates that used to blur until I pinned them down, screenshots from the social posts, champagne bubbles frozen mid-float, spa robes, the caption that used the word blessed like a coupon code. I added a tidy log of calls with notations I'd once told myself were too petty to record. Alan said, "Details win," and I have always been excellent at homework when I finally decide the class matters. Outside, November ran its gray flag up the pole. The apartment's heat kicked on in fits, and the hall always smelled faintly of someone else's coffee. I put up a small wreath because my hands needed something to do that wasn't counting. I baked a batch of molasses cookies, the kind that come out with cracked tops like tiny maps. I wanted to see if sweetness could live here without being asked to perform. Laura's texts came threaded with the holidays. Let's talk about Thanksgiving logistics. And under that, any thought on the mortgage situation? She wrote the number again as if repetition could make it less absurd. $25,000. It took me 3 hours of staring at the envelope before I called her back. 2 weeks is what they gave us, she said, a tightness at the edge of her voice. If we pay and show good faith, we keep the house. Otherwise, I don't know. They mentioned a sale date. Mom, I can't have the kids wake up in a rental on Christmas. She'd picked the right words. Wake up. Christmas. What is the plan if you don't get the money? I asked, keeping my tone even. We're exploring options, she said quickly. But this is fixable. If we just had a bridge. I looked at the envelope. The pink card watched me like a friend who knew my tricks. I can't pay your mortgage. Silence, long enough to count. Then, you can't. Or you won't. I won't. A rustle, as if she'd stood up. After everything we've done for you since Dad died, moving you, handling the funeral. You didn't handle the funeral to earn a loan, I said softly. You handled the funeral because you loved him. I'm grateful. That doesn't make me a bank. She went colder. Fine. Well, we'll see you next Thursday. 3 o'clock. I'm making the sweet potato casserole you like. After we hung up, I put my head on the cool wood of the table and let the heartbreak come. Not the old grief with its heavy dignity, but a smaller ache that knows all the names and faces involved. Then I sat up and called Alan. I said no, I told him. Good, he said, and his voice carried a steadiness that made my shoulders drop. That's the hardest part to do the first time. Do not go alone on Thursday. It's Thanksgiving with my family, I said, and your family is the one applying pressure. Go with a boundary in your pocket. Better yet, put it on paper. If you decide to contribute anything ever again, he stressed the if, it must be on your terms, signed and secured. But my advice is still, do not loan. If they won't consider counseling or a sale, they will eat any number you give them and come back hungry. I slept poorly, a parade of what-ifs marching through the dark. When the sun finally cracked the blinds, I made coffee and opened the envelope. The pink card looked up at me. I read the note out loud. You are not an ATM. You are a person with boundaries. I added a line. If they loved you only while the money flowed, that isn't love. That is plumbing. The day before Thanksgiving, my phone pinged with a message from Chris. It was a forwarded email, all capital letters, the kind of formatting that makes your stomach drop before you know why. I clicked. A notice from their lender. Intent to accelerate the debt. Foreclosure proceedings may commence. Cure within 15 days to avoid additional action. Bold dates. Words like default and collateral. The kind of document that turns a house into a stack of obligations. Under it, his note. As you can see, this is serious. We need family now. I typed and erased 3 replies before choosing, I'm sorry, I can't fund this. Have you set an appointment with a housing counselor? I pasted a link Alan had sent, a nonprofit, HUD approved. I hit send and put the phone face down. I cook the way you cook when you don't know what else to do. Cranberry sauce that stains everything fuchsia, green beans with toasted almonds because Frank used to eat the almonds straight from the cutting board. I made a small pan of dressing in a dish meant for one and laughed at myself because who does that? People do new things, Marion, I told myself. People learn to set a small table with both hands shaking. On Thanksgiving, I drove to Laura's with the ridiculous little dish strapped into the passenger seat like it needed a seatbelt. The neighborhood still looked like money. Trimmed lawns in winter's light, wreaths hung before the leaves were raked. Their house, white with black shutters, wore a bow the size of a kid's torso on the door. In the foyer, a vase held branches sprayed with fake snow. The stairs were staged with lanterns. I wanted to love it like I had when we moved them in and the paint still smelled wet. Mom! Sophie and Nate came at me in a tangle of arms and legs, teenage warmth and hints of new deodorants. Sophie's hair was swept up in a way that said a friend had helped, and Nate's voice had found somewhere lower to live. I kissed both heads and breathed them in and told the place inside me that had been bracing. This is why. Laura appeared, face in hostess mode, cheeks a little too pink. You look nice, she said, and kissed me once, carefully, as if I were a package with fragile stamped on it. Dinner's almost ready. In the kitchen, the island held the parade of the familiar. Turkey under foil, potatoes whipped into a glossy cloud, rolls waiting for butter. 3 place settings. I blinked. Aren't we waiting for... Oh, Chris had to run to the store, she said, too fast. He'll be a minute. Sit. I'll get you wine. We ate as if we were auditioning for a commercial. Polite, pretty. We talked college essays and Nate's new coach. After plates had leveled off and I'd laughed at a story I only half heard, Laura folded her napkin deliberately and set it by her plate. I'm just going to say this, she began, a warning in the softness. We need that money to save the house. It's the only way to keep the kids stable. We will pay you back. We just need you to show up for the family the way we've always shown up for you. She'd chosen a good audience. Sophie and Nate looked at me with those open, dear faces kids wear before they understand the machinery behind their lives. For a moment, I considered retreat, a check now, a boundary later. But later is where my life had been going to die. I reached into my purse and set a sheet of paper on the table. Not a check, a list. The header read, Ways I can help that aren't cash. Groceries. I can take the kids' school shopping and pay. I can cover therapy for the family to get through this season if you'll go. I can drive you to a housing counselor and sit with you. I can host the kids if you need to pack or move. I can help you list the car for sale. Laura stared at it like I'd placed a dead fish next to the rolls. You're offering to babysit while we lose the house? I'm offering practical, loving help that doesn't ask me to jeopardize my own stability, I said. I won't write a $25,000 check. I won't write a $2,500 check. I will not write a check. Her mouth hardened. You're punishing us. I'm protecting me, I said. And whether you believe it or not, I think I'm protecting you from a pattern that keeps getting worse. The garage door whirred. A moment later, Chris strode in with a too bright smile and an expensive bag from a store whose branding always whispers luxury. He kissed the air near my cheek. Great to see you, Marion, he said, all courtesy. Then he clocked the paper on the table. What's this? Laura pushed the list toward him as if to say, see? He scanned it, then looked up with a laugh that wasn't a laugh. So the answer is no. The answer is no, I said. He set his jaw and leaned back on his heels, hands braced on the island like a coach about to draw lines on a board. I didn't want to go here on Thanksgiving, he began, always a good sign that someone wants to go there. But frankly, I think you're being manipulated. Lawyers? Really? They're parasites, Marion. They scare older people about their own family and then bill by the hour for the privilege. Chris, Laura said, warning. I hired an attorney because I needed my accounts protected, I said, calm as I could make it. He gave me language for something I didn't want to see. What language? He said, but it wasn't a question. His smile had gone thin. Abuse, I said. It landed like a plate on tile. Too loud, shards everywhere. Sophie stood up, chair legs scraping. Can we not ruin Thanksgiving? She said, voice high and brave. Nate stared at his roll like it might tell him what the right thing to do was. I took a breath so deep it reached back to the old house. I am not calling you names, I said. I am naming a pattern. Requests that escalate. Pressure disguised as love. Punishment when I say no. I won't fund your mortgage. I will help you face what this is. Chris made a show of blowing air through his cheeks. The universal sign for this woman is unreasonable. We'll figure it out, he said to Laura, shrugging like a hero. To me, it's your money. Keep it. Hope you enjoy the beige. It was so petty, I nearly laughed. Instead, I folded my list, put it back in my purse, and stood. Thank you for dinner, I said. The sweet potatoes were delicious. Mom! Laura reached out, then stopped herself. She looked at the kids, at me at the door. We're supposed to put up the tree tomorrow. I can come help with that, I said. If we can agree that money is off the table. She didn't answer. I hugged the kids and let their arms anchor me one heartbeat longer than usual. I love you, I told them, because that is the one check I will write until my hand can't hold a pen. At home, I put the little dish in the fridge and sat down with the envelope. The silence of my apartment had a clean edge to it. I took out the pink card and, under the lines I'd written, added, "Today you said no and did not apologize. I dated it." I slid it back in. My phone lit up almost immediately. A text from Laura. "You didn't have to embarrass us." Then another. "I can't believe you said that in front of the kids." I typed, "I didn't. I talked to you. I love you. I'm here for everything except money." I hit send and turned the ringer off. The next morning, of course, the door buzzer growled. I checked the camera. A courier held a long white envelope with our family name on it in calligraphy, because the world still has a sense of humor. Inside, a glossy invitation to their neighborhood holiday stroll with a line about raising funds for the community food pantry. I laughed. I cried. I wrote a check to the pantry directly, and I did not tell anyone about it. At noon, I drove to the bank and asked for a certified letter to send to Laura and Chris. It explained in polite legal language Alan had drafted that I had closed shared access, that no one had permission to transact on my accounts, that any future requests for money would be declined. It was not a threat. It was a fence. I signed it with the same hand I'd once used to sign field trip permission slips and permission to pierce ears and the deed of a house I had believed was forever. On my way home, I took a small detour past the old place. The roses were bare sticks, patient in their bones. The new owners had painted the door a blue Frank would have loved. For a moment, I let myself miss a life I will always miss. Then I drove back to my apartment, where the heat hisses and the table fits the room and the envelope waits, square and steady. That night, I cooked nothing. I ate a turkey sandwich over the sink and drank water from the good glass. I set out my list again and added one more line under ways I can help. I can show up for myself without guilt. Then I taped the manila envelope closed along one side, so it opened like a book, something I could return to, not a box I'd dump out when panicked. At the bottom of the pink card, I wrote, "Next step, be ready for the calls." Then I turned off the lamp, the room settling around me like a decision, and went to bed having chosen the kind of peace you have to practice. The morning after Thanksgiving, my phone behaved like a kettle left on high. First a long text from Laura, paragraphs that began with, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed, and ended with, "You've changed since Dad," then 2 short ones that bit harder. "We'll remember this, and don't expect us to bail you out when you're old." I stared at the last line until the words went fuzzy, then took a picture of the screen and slid the printout into the envelope. Documentation wasn't vengeance. It was a railing to hold while the stairs shook. At 9:07, Chris called. I let it go to voicemail. He followed with a message so cheerful it squeaked. "Hey, Marion, let's reset. We were all in our feelings yesterday. If you could just float us a stopgap, say 10 grand, we'll handle the arrears ourselves. We're turning this ship around. Don't let a lawyer with a boat payment come between family." I saved that, too. The kids texted in their own dialects. Sophie: "Hey, Grandma, can we plus still bake next week? I can bring my playlist and not play the sad ones." Nate: "I know you're getting a lot of texts. Love you." Their love came uncut by manipulation. I wanted to cover it with my body like I used to when they were small and headed for a corner of a coffee table. I wrote back yes to baking, and I love you to both, then put my phone face down and breathed the way Alan taught me. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6, until the edges of the day stopped buzzing. I called Alan at 10. "It's escalating," I said. "They're trotting out every version of If You Loved Us and a few I haven't met." "Good job saving everything," he said. "This is exactly the pattern we discussed." Next steps. We stopped being purely reactive. The phrase dropped into my chest like a small, bracing stone. What does proactive look like when I don't want to send the sheriff to my child's door? Options, he said. We can file a civil complaint for conversion and elder financial exploitation. That starts a paper process and puts them on notice. We can also submit a report to Adult Protective Services. In our state, they have an elder abuse unit that coordinates with the DA. You decide how far to take it, but paper creates accountability. Also, I want you to meet with a financial advocate, colleague of mine named Gavin Reed. He'll help you build longer-term firewalls and a plan that doesn't depend on their behavior changing. A name with calm in it. Gavin, I repeated as if trying on a coat. What does report mean in real life? It means you tell the truth to a neutral party, he said. It doesn't automatically mean handcuffs. It does mean your future you won't have to wish present you had done the hard thing. I thought of the pink card inside the envelope. Present Me could feel her hand in my back. Okay, I said, let's file. There's a peculiar holiness to ugly errands. At the courthouse, everyone stood in the same line. Men in hoodies with traffic tickets, a woman corralling 2 toddlers in dinosaur pajamas, a couple in suits holding hands like the vestibule of justice required it. The guard at the metal detector called me ma'am and inspected my envelope with exaggerated care, as if the paper itself might bite. It smelled like sanitizer and old carpet. I wanted to turn around and walk into a day where my biggest worry was whether the crock pot would overdo the pot roast. Civil filing second window, the clerk said when I gave her my name. Her glasses were a little crooked, her nails a perfect winter red. Are we starting something or responding to something? Starting, I said. The word lodged in my throat, then cleared. A complaint. She slid a packet across the counter and watched me like a teacher who has seen every kind of panic. Fill out the top. Your attorney can finish the legalese. Initial here if you'd like court-supervised mediation before trial. Mediation, a conversation with referees. Supervised sounded like seatbelts, like a lifeguard watching water. I initialed. When I signed my name on the last line, under penalty of perjury, under a date that would show up someday on a timeline, I half expected thunder. The clerk just stamped the top page with that heavy clunk that says, "Now this counts. You'll get a case number by close of business," she said. "Keep an eye on your mail, and bring a book if you ever have to come sit in our waiting area." She smiled. "We run on court time." I stepped back onto the sidewalk into December air that had opinions. 28 when clear. a sky so clean the edges felt sharpened. Somewhere past the low buildings and grocery store flags was the rise people around here call Skyline Ridge, blue and honest in winter light. I stood there with a copy of the stamped packet in my hand and realized my stomach had stopped lifting and dropping like a small elevator. I had expected to feel like a traitor. What I felt was adult. Back home, I made tea hot enough to scald and called the APS intake line. The woman on the phone had that calm, careful tone people use when talking a person through an injury you can't see. I told her the facts. Transfers, texts, threats wrapped in silk, the foreclosure ultimatum framed as weather I could fix. "We'll open an intake," she said. "We might reach out for more documents and possibly make a home visit. To you, not to them, if needed. You've done the right thing calling." I want this pattern to stop," I said. "I don't want my daughter's mug shot on the 6 o'clock news. Our goal is safety and services," she said. "Law enforcement is a separate path, and frankly," her voice softened, "a lot of people never call, and they wish they had. You are not alone." After I hung up, I wrote her words on a blue index card and tucked it behind the pink one. "You are not alone." I added the date. The envelope gained weight by ounces, but the weight felt like ballast. Gavin turned out to be younger than I expected, with laugh lines that looked earned and a way of listening, like he was tuning a radio to pull a clear station out of the air. We met at my bank because he said beginnings live better where the money lives. He had me list every account, every automatic draft, every place online where a younger, trusting version of me had stored a password like a spare key under the mat. "We're going to treat this like a business," he said. "Nothing in or out you can't explain. We'll add trusted contacts at your brokerage, so if someone tries to charm their way in, you get a call. We'll put a credit freeze in place. And I'd like to set up a separate, small checking account for fun money, something you can spend without guilt, so your nervous system doesn't start to equate boundaries with deprivation." "Fun money," I said, skeptical and a little defensive. "Feels frivolous." "Feels necessary," he said. "Boundaries work better when they leave room for life." We laughed once at the same moment. When he asked what I call my computer, and I confessed I hadn't named machines since my first car. He typed "laptop, Marion's only" into a spreadsheet and nodded like we'd christened a boat. I walked out with a folder, a checklist, and a small feeling I hadn't met since before Frank died: competence. The barrage at home didn't stop. It changed tempo. Laura's messages shifted from scolding to strategic. "If you had told me you were reporting us, I would have asked you to wait," she wrote. "This is humiliating." Then APS called asking questions. "How could you?" Then later. "Fine. If you need boundaries, we'll give you boundaries." When I tried to set a baking day with Sophie, the reply came from Laura's phone. "We're busy." I stood in my quiet kitchen with my hands braced on the counter and decided I would not argue with a closed door. Instead, I would open a window. I wrote Sophie a handwritten note, ink that does not vanish in a deleted thread, and mailed it with a recipe card for gingerbread, the one with cocoa powder that turns the dough the color of old mahogany. I wrote, "I love you. I'm here whenever your calendar says yes. Keep the card even if the cookies flop." Then I put my pen down and drank water from the good glass, so slowly it felt like a prayer. The first weekend of December, I bought a skinny artificial tree that looked bashful until I strung 3 strands of white lights and hung ornaments that know the story of our family. A lopsided clay star, a photo of the kids on Santa's lap in a mall where the carpet made everyone itchy. The glass bird Frank bought the year we were too broke to buy the set. We hung that one bird and said we liked the look of minimalism. The apartment, which had felt like a waiting room after the move, glowed. Beige can't survive fairy lights. I set the tree by the window so I could see it from the sidewalk when I came in with groceries, the way Frank liked to see Christmas from the curb. Church used to be a thing we did because it was a thing we did. Now I went because I needed to sit in a room where nobody wanted anything from me, except perhaps the harmony on verse 3. The pastor, who still looked like a college kid playing dress-up in a robe, spoke about hope the way you speak about a shy animal. No sudden movements, no shouting. After the service, a woman named B, who wears hats with opinions, squeezed my hand and said, "You look like you've been holding your breath a long time. Come sing with us on Thursdays." I wrote it on my calendar the way you write a doctor's appointment. Necessary care. On Monday, the certified letters reached Laura and Chris. I know this because at 8:14 a.m., my phone exploded. "You put us on notice? On notice?" Chris's voicemail galloped. "You think we won't counter? Defamation is real, Marion. You want to play legal, we'll play legal." I sent the audio file to Alan. He replied, "Good. Keep not responding. We'll communicate only through counsel from here on out." That same day, the court email arrived with a case number, and below it, an invitation to a settlement conference in January. The subject line had the word mandatory, which made my palms sweat and my shoulders drop, oddly at the same time. Mandatory also meant boundaries would have chaperones. I took myself to lunch to mark the moment, a cafe 2 miles away where the coffee comes in, mugs heavy enough to count as hand weights. I ordered a tuna melt I didn't have to share and read a novel where nobody asked the heroine for a bridge loan. A woman, a little older than me, sat down at the next table with a crossword and a pen that meant business. We ended up trading clues, her obscure rivers for my old sitcom actors, and for an hour I was a person in a world, not a cautionary tale. Back at home, the loneliness arrived the way weather fronts do, slow, then suddenly in the room. I let it. I put on the radio and scrubbed the sink until it shone like a badge, and then I cried the kind of quiet cry that doesn't need Kleenex so much as time passing. After, I wrote another line on the pink card. Grief and boundaries can ride in the same car. 2 days later, a package landed at my door with no return address. Inside, the china teacups I'd given Laura to store for me, wrapped in the same tissue paper I'd used, a note in her handwriting. "Since you're so independent?" The cup rattled in its saucer when I held it. I set one on the counter like a specimen, then poured hot water in it and watched the steam fog the thin rim. I did not call to say, "Thank you," or "How could you?" I sipped and tasted our history, and then washed the cup and put it on my shelf because that, too, is mine. Gavin met me once more before year's end, this time at my apartment. He sat at my table and admired my ridiculous skinny tree as if it were a full orchestra. We went through the checklist, freezes in place, alerts set, beneficiaries reviewed, passwords stored in a vault that required a code I wrote down on yet another card and put in the safe deposit box. "Last item," he said, tapping the list with his pen. "Small experiments. You still doing anything that feels like joy?" "Church on Thursdays," I said. "Cookies next week if the calendar gods tilt my way." "And something just for you, no grandchildren attached?" "I bought a little watercolor set," I confessed. "The palette looks like a box of Easter eggs." "I don't know what I'm doing." "Perfect," he said. "Do more of what you don't know how to do yet." When he left, the apartment door clicked shut with the sound of a good seal. I set out the paints and made a mess that looked like a storm learning its colors. It dried ugly. I loved it. I dated it in pencil and taped it inside the kitchen cabinet where I keep salt, pepper, and the truth. The last Friday before Christmas, Sophie appeared at my door on her own steam, cheeks flushed from the cold, a tote bag hanging off her shoulder like a commitment. "Mom thinks I'm at the library," she said, not quite proud and not quite sorry. "Don't make it a thing." "I will make it exactly the size you need," I said. We baked gingerbread people with knees and elbows that puffed, and she told me about essays and boys who don't know where to put their hands and the way it feels to drive at night with your music up and nobody telling you where to turn. I didn't ask her about the mortgage or the letters or whether she thought I was the villain. I gave her the good spatula and sang harmony badly and sent her home with a tin I wasn't sure would make it through the front door. After she left, the apartment felt both full and emptied. I opened the envelope and slid a new index card into the stack, green for the season. I wrote, "Today, love came in flower on the floor and a teenager's laugh. This is why I picked a fence." When the call came from the court scheduler the following week, I stood at the window and watched the streetlights turn the snow into sugar. "Your settlement conference is set for January 23rd at 9 a.m., she said. "Bring any documents you want the magistrate to review." "I have an envelope," I said, then laughed because how do you explain a spine made of paper to a stranger? "I'll be ready." That night, I turned off my ringer and slept with my phone in the other room on purpose. In the morning, I made pancakes that came out lopsided and perfect and ate them too fast and didn't apologize to anyone, not even the stack. Then I took out the pink card, read it, and added one more line at the bottom, the kind that pulls a season through to the next, midpoint. Today I chose the road where I don't buy access to peace. I folded the envelope shut like a book and set it back on the table, square and steady, ready for what comes after the turn. January had a sound to it. Radiators ticking like a metronome, tires hissing on slush. The quiet that falls after the holidays pack their glitter and leave town. I kept the tree up until the needles started to obey gravity and then took it down in small, respectful steps. The envelope stayed open on the table like a book I was still reading. On the 22nd, I ironed a blouse because my mother's voice still lives in my closet and says wrinkles make a statement you don't mean. I packed the envelope, the pink and blue and green index cards, my list of ways I can help that aren't cash, and a bottle of water because I have learned courts aren't generous with basics. Alan called at 5 and went through the plan one last time. "Remember your 3 anchors," he said, the way coaches give you one thing to hold on to when the stadium noise swells. 1. Your goal is safety and accountability, not punishment. 2. No direct payments ever again, only through a structured, enforceable mechanism. 3. If you feel yourself being pulled into the role of fixer, ask for a break. And if they cry, I said, I will not hand out tissues. The court provides those. He laughed once. "You're steadier than most clients walking into this. That's not nothing." I set out clothes for the morning, like a kid before the first day of school. I put the envelope beside my purse and laid my palm on it as if it were a sleeping animal I didn't want to wake. Then I went to bed and slept badly anyway, dreaming of hallways that didn't connect and doors that opened to rooms I didn't recognize. The courthouse wore January like a uniform, windows filmed with cold, people moving in layers, a security guard whose breath came out in white clouds every time the doors swung wide. Alan met me at the front, crisp suit, scarf wound like a promise. We passed through the metal detector and into the second floor where the settlement conference rooms live, small, beige, and aggressively neutral, the color realtors call grage, as if naming it fancier makes it less forgettable. Our magistrate was a woman with gray hair cut in a clean bob and a face that said she'd seen worse and better and would not be impressed by theatrics. "Think of me as your traffic cop," she said when the 4 of us sat, me and Alan on one side, Laura and Chris on the other with their attorney, a man whose cufflinks had more personality than his smile. "I don't decide facts, I facilitate resolution. If there's a deal to be made, you'll make it. If not, you'll carry on to the next step." Laura wouldn't meet my eyes at first. Chris met them too much, as if eye contact were a weapon. Their lawyer introduced himself and shook hands with a grip that tried to set a tone. Alan's handshake said, "We don't grade on grip strength here." The magistrate asked the lawyers to summarize. Alan went first, and I loved him a little for the order he made out of my mess. He spoke in sentences that began with, "The evidence will show," instead of "my client feels." He named numbers, dates, screenshots, the foreclosure notice, and the pattern of requests framed as emergencies. He used the phrase elder financial exploitation without flinching and followed it with remedial relief, restitution, and consent judgment, which made me think of seatbelts again. Chris's lawyer cleared his throat like an overture. "We dispute the characterization," he said. "Any funds transferred were gifts, offered freely. There was no coercion, no fraud. My clients have supported Ms. Walker extensively through her transition after her husband's passing." He nodded at me, gracious as a weatherman. "And what we have here is a family misunderstanding weaponized by a third party." By third party, he meant Alan. By weaponized, he meant I had said no in a way that didn't leave room for negotiation. The magistrate nodded as if listening to two teenagers explain why neither had technically left the dishes in the sink. "Thank you, counsel," she said. "Now, here's how this works. You'll spend most of the time in separate rooms. I'll shuttle between you and see whether there's a number and a structure you can live with. No one loves today. If we're lucky, you all leave a little irritated and a lot clearer." We followed a bailiff down the hall to a room with a table, 4 chairs, and a box of tissues planted in the center like a thorny little tree. Alan set our envelope on the table, then smiled at the tissues. "No, thank you," he said to no one in particular. The first shuttle was quick. The magistrate stopped in our doorway with her notepad. "Baseline?" she asked. Alan nodded at me to go first. I read from my card because words behave for me when they're anchored to paper. Goal, safety and accountability. Terms, no direct payments. Restitution through a structured plan secured by a consent judgment. Financial counseling required for any plan to proceed. No contact regarding money. Communications through counsel. If they default, the consent judgment becomes an actual judgment automatically, non-negotiable. "Dollar amount?" she asked. Alan slid a sheet across to her. It had a total I'd memorized and a grace I'd insisted on. A small forgiveness for anything I couldn't document to a legal standard. Choosing not to swallow the last penny of pain felt like choosing to be a person. The magistrate nodded, stood, and left with her notepad tucked under her arm like a tray. We waited. Court time happens in layers. You check your phone for the hour and a minute has passed. The radiator makes that gentle clunk and you flinch like it's news. Alan talked about nothing important. His neighbor's orange cat that insists on adopting both sides of the fence, a soup place around the corner with a line no matter the weather, because human is a strategy. When the magistrate came back, she wore the face mediators wear when people have said things. "They have an offer," she said, then held up a hand before my mouth could betray me. "It is not a good offer, but it is a start." She laid down a sheet. It read like a bad joke written by a committee. "We will not admit wrongdoing" at the top, a repayment number that ignored the capitalized word "arrears" in the lender's letter. "Gifts" used like a spell. And a clause proposing that I contribute a family solidarity stipend to help them stabilize while they pivot, a word that belongs in dance class or startup decks, not mortgages. Also, a paragraph limiting my contact with the grandchildren if I chose to escalate. My mouth went dry. That last part is not enforceable in this setting, Alan said calmly, and belongs in a different kind of court if they want to embarrass themselves. We will ignore it. I sat back. A muscle in my neck tried to become a fist. The magistrate watched me the way lifeguards watch. "Can I see them?" I asked. Not to talk, just to see that they are actually the people I remember. She tilted her head in a motion that lived somewhere between, "No, and I can't stop you. We'll be mixing in the hall. You'll have opportunities for accidental eye contact." She tapped the paper. "Do you want a counter?" "Yes," I said, and heard my voice steady. "With the same terms we brought and a note that gifts don't come with due dates and threats." She smiled with something like approval. "That's the sentence of the morning." She left to shuttle. We stayed to breathe. In the hall, on my way to the restroom, I passed Laura. For a moment, the courthouse fell away and we were back in my kitchen a lifetime ago, making a volcano for her third-grade science fair with baking soda and vinegar and an old cereal box. Her face looked both older and like it did when she was 4, and stabbed her peas with unnecessary vigor. She opened her mouth and then pressed her lips together. I kept moving because my body had learned to walk even when my heart wanted to go and catch my baby. Back in the room, Alan was sketching on a legal pad. "Worst-case scenarios," he said, pushing the paper toward me. "If they agree to nothing, we proceed to discovery. We survive that. If they escalate with the kids, we document and keep our side clean. We survive that, too. If they default later, the consent judgment we secure today lets us enforce without a trial. Best case, they agree to the plan and spectacularly follow it. Middle case, they agree and stumble and we hold them accountable without you lifting a checkbook." "I feel like a bad mother," I said into my hands. "You feel like a mother who stopped bailing water out of a boat with a hole and started patching the hole," he said. "Different muscle." The magistrate returned an hour later with a stack of paper thinner than I wanted and heavier than I feared. "They moved on some numbers," she said. "They will not use the words you want. They are clinging to gifts. However, they are willing to sign a structured repayment plan with a stipulated judgment that springs upon default. They propose a 5-year window." She paused. "They balk at counseling. They claim their church provides that." "Their church provides sermons," I said before I could stop myself. "Counseling is a different thing." Alan leaned in. "We can compromise on the label," he said. "Call it third-party financial education. The content matters, not the banner over the door." He looked at the magistrate. "We also want security. Lien on a vehicle or a second on anything with equity. We need teeth." The magistrate's mouth twitched. "You all keep using the right metaphors for January." She stood. "Let me keep shuttling." The third shuttle took long enough for me to memorize the pattern on the fake wood grain of the table. When she came back, she shut the door with a care that made me sit straighter. "2 pieces," she said. "One legal, one human. Legal first. They will agree to a stipulated judgment. Amount slightly lower than your number. Timeline is 3 years. First payment due in 30 days. Security in the form of a lien on their newer car. If they sell, you get paid first. They will not admit wrongdoing. The language will say, 'Dispute resolved.' I've squeezed about as much blood as I can get out of those stone words." She glanced at her pad. "Third-party financial education is acceptable. No contact on money goes into the order. All communication through counsel." I could breathe inside that. The words weren't poetry, but they were a fence. "Human," she said, and now her voice carried a weight I felt in my bones. "There is an APS investigator in the building today. That has nothing to do with me. That's a parallel lane. She stopped me in the hall to say they've opened a case. She wanted me to know that their intake process may include interviews with your daughter and her husband. That can include referral to a prosecutor. You don't control that process." The room tilted the way rooms do when elevators start. "Charges," I said, and the word tasted like a coin. "Possibility," the magistrate said, "not inevitability. But I say this because the temptation in these rooms is to carry more than belongs to you. You can't bargain with a different agency's mandate. You can only address the civil piece in front of you." It felt like someone had placed a stone in my hands and told me to hold it and not ask where it came from. I looked at Alan. He'd gone quiet, lawyer eyes doing that faraway math lawyers do when they're incorporating a new force into the problem set. "I need a minute," I said, and the magistrate nodded and left like someone good at doors. Alan didn't speak. He knows how to let silence be a collaborator. I pressed my palms flat against the table and felt the wood pretend to be sturdier than it was. "If there are charges," I said, "they will say I put them there." "They might," he said, "and they might say the winter is your fault. People who are scared say many things. I never wanted—" The sentence ran out of road. "You wanted the bleeding to stop," he said. "You chose lawful ways to make it stop. That's not the same as choosing a mugshot." I thought of the pink card under the flap of the envelope. "You are not an ATM. You are a person with boundaries." I thought of Sophie at my counter, dusting flour off a nose that will someday look back at itself in a mirror and decide where it belongs in a lineage of women who keep or spend or lose or repair. I thought of Nate, dragging the toe of his sneaker on a gym floor that smells like dust and citrus, learning what a team is and isn't. What if, I asked slowly, we include a clause that says if they complete the plan, every payment, the class, the no contact, we will provide a letter to APS indicating the civil matter is resolved to my satisfaction, not a retraction, a fact. Alan blinked once, then nodded. That's reasonable. It's also true. It gives them a path that doesn't depend on your endless rescue. He wrote it down. Call it a restorative letter upon completion. Restorative, I said, tasting a word I might live in. The magistrate came back and took the revision like a waiter who knows which changes the kitchen can make and which will get you banned. She left again, and I stared at the box of tissues until the fibers blurred. I won't use you, I told it. Not today. When she returned the next time, she had a paper clipped into a thin stack with blue-backed forms that look official, even before the ink touches them. We have a frame, she said. Subject to final language your counsel will fight over in emails for a week. Her eyes softened, a human leaking past the robe. They want one face-to-face statement in this room before anyone signs. You can decline, or you can agree, and I will sit 12 inches away and enforce the rules. What rules? I asked. No shouting, no bargaining. Each of you gets 2 minutes. You talk about your own choices. No you always or you never. No crying as a tactic. She half smiled. If someone cries as a human, I don't penalize humans. I looked at Alan. He said nothing with his eyebrows in a way that means, you know your own gut. My gut said it didn't want to end a day of adulting without looking my child in the face. Okay, I said. We moved to a larger room. The magistrate took a chair like a referee who'd grown up on hard courts. Laura and Chris sat across. Chris's lawyer melted into wallpaper in the corner. Alan took a spot where I could feel his presence, but not hide behind it. The magistrate nodded at me. Ms. Walker first. I spoke from the card because I didn't trust freefall. I asked for today because I want safety and accountability, I said. I will not fund your mortgage. I will not give you money directly again. I am willing to sign a plan that returns what was taken in a structure that protects everyone. I hope you take that plan and keep it. I hope you take the class, even if you call it something else. I will communicate with you through counsel about money and in our regular lives about ordinary human things when we're ready. I love you. I also love me. Laura's mouth trembled, a tiny movement like the first wind on a lake before waves remember how. Chris looked at his lawyer, then at the magistrate, then at me like I was a witness he wasn't sure would help him. Laura took a breath that sounded like both a start and an apology. I don't recognize us, she said, and her voice was not on a stage, but in a kitchen with a volcano drying on the counter. I know we asked you for too much. I know screenshots look bad. I know we said things we shouldn't have. I don't accept some of these words. Abuse makes me feel like I'm a villain in a movie I didn't audition for. But I accept the plan because I don't know another way through. I want my kids to keep their grandmother and their names to stay out of rooms like this. She started to cry then, not as a tactic. I've known her too long to misread the difference, but as a person who had arrived at the cliff of her own choices and looked over. The magistrate passed the box of tissues without commentary. Laura took one, dabbed her eyes, and didn't use it to sell me anything. Chris put a hand on her shoulder in a gesture that belonged to a better day. I watched his fingers and wondered who taught him how to be a husband. I hoped a class could teach him some of what marriage asks and money answers too quickly. We signed nothing in that moment. Courts do not run on moments. They run on forms. The magistrate explained the next steps and dates. Alan gathered our things like someone who has done this hundreds of times and still knows each paper contains a life. In the hall, while Alan chased a clerk for a copy, Laura drifted near enough that the air between us belonged to us alone. "I don't want them to arrest me," she said, straight without reach. "I don't want that either," I said. I kept my voice low. "I included a letter in the plan. When you complete it, I'll tell APS the civil side is resolved. I can't control the rest." She nodded. "Okay." The word didn't fix anything. It didn't throw a rope. It sat between us like a small, honest stone. We rode the elevator down together with strangers who kept their eyes on the doors, which is the law in elevators. Outside, the air had inched up to 33 degree Kelvin, the kind of winter mercy that makes salt look like frost. Chris stood by the curb scrolling a phone, calculating angles or reading weather, or pretending a world existed where he hadn't just surrendered to a plan that named his behavior. Laura hugged herself and looked past me toward the parking garage where their car waited to become a lean. "I'll text you about cookies," she said, an old code, "when it's appropriate." "When it's appropriate," I echoed. It felt like a language class. "Repeat after me until your mouth learns meaning." Back in my apartment, I set the envelope on the table and didn't open it. I poured water into the kettle and waited for the boil that comes later than you wish and right when it should. I stood at the window and watched a woman in a red hat walk her dog like they'd invented sidewalks. I listened to my building's familiar hisses and clicks. When the kettle announced itself, I made tea and finally sat down. I wrote a new card, purple this time because I had bought a pack with too many colors. I wrote, "Settlement isn't forgiveness and it isn't revenge. It's a map out of a swamp, and you still have to walk." Then, under that, in smaller print, "Crisis. Today I let it be possible that my daughter could face charges. I did not pick up the whole world. I picked up only what is mine." I dated it, slid it behind the pink one, and closed the flap. My phone buzzed once. A message from Alan. "Good work today. We'll tidy the language and get signatures in a week or two. Start small celebrations. They help the nervous system believe you when you say safe." I texted back a picture of the first watercolor I'd made, the ugly storm learning its colors. He sent back a thumbs up and the soup place's address, because lawyers know where to get soup after rooms like that. I ate toast for dinner, the kind that shatters a little when you bite, and let the kitchen be a place with crumbs again. Before bed, I walked to the window and looked toward the shape of Skyline Ridge, solid under a slice of moon. Tomorrow would be copy edits and emails, language softened to palatable legal starch. Tonight would be sleeping with the knowledge that the worst thing could happen and I would still be the person I decided to be. I turned off the lamp. The apartment let me know it was home with a small, settling sound I was learning to trust. In the dark, the envelope made no noise at all, which is the loudest kind of peace I know. The email with the final language arrived on a Tuesday, when the high was pretending to be spring. 61 Anivres in the sun, sidewalks steaming a little where old snow gave up. Alan sent 2 versions, one with comments like polite arguments in the margins, and one clean, the one I'd be signing. "Read the clean one," he said on the phone. "Then let me worry about the Argyle sweater of legalese." I made tea, sat at the table with the envelope beside me like a witness, and read every line slowly. No admissions. Fine. 3-year plan, first payment in 30 days. Lien recorded on the newer car, the one that purrs like a cat that eats too well. Third-party financial education agreed, and scheduled through a non-profit whose website looks like it was designed by a kind librarian who knows what to click. A stipulated judgment that turns into a judgment if they miss a due date by more than 10 days. No contact about money, all messages through counsel. And the clause we added, upon completion, I will provide a letter to the agency stating the civil matter is resolved to my satisfaction. I signed. I have signed papers that meant new life. A mortgage with Frank's hand warm beside mine. Adoption forms for a stray dog that turned out not to be all that stray. Permission slips that felt like parachutes for field trips to museums, and a pumpkin patch. This was not that. This signature felt like walking out of a burning house carrying only what the future needs. The first payment posted the day the forecast called for flurries that never quite delivered. The bank app showed the deposit like a small square of solid ground in a marsh. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't forward it to anyone. I sat still while my nervous system did its calculations and then wrote one line on a yellow index card. Today, a consequence became a habit for someone else. That is not my job. I slid the card beneath the pink one. 2 weeks later, they sold the shiny car. I learned this not from paperwork, but because Sophie sent a picture of her carrying a bag of groceries up their front steps with the caption, "Got strong since we are a one-car fam." A heart emoji. No ask inside it. I let the image land without putting it on any ledger. APS visited me one afternoon with the kind of knock that means we will leave if you don't answer. The investigator, soft scarf, boots with salt on them, sat on my couch while I gave her a cup of tea and a timeline. She looked at the stack of index cards like they were both evidence and art. "We'll keep the file open while the plan progresses," she said. "If they comply, we usually close without further action." Usually. I could live with that. In February, a listing appeared on a community board at church. A one-bedroom cottage behind a craftsman on Juniper Street, 2 miles from the library, 1/2 a mile from the choir room where bees' hats collect praises. Light, quiet, small fenced yard, the paper said. And below that, a phone number with a real person on the other end. The beige apartment had done its job. It stabilized me. But I'd started to dream in color again. The cottage door faced south and wore winter light like a promise. The living room held exactly 1 couch, 1 chair, 1 table without apology. The kitchen was honest. No island faking grandeur, just counters that invited kneading, chopping, simmering. Out back, a scrap of ground big enough for a planter and a chair. I stood there in my boots and looked at the fence line and heard myself say, "I can make something grow here." I called Alan to ask the question I'd trained myself to ask. Can I afford this without opening even a corner for them? "You can," he said, and walked me through the numbers slowly until my shoulders dropped. "Do it if it feeds you." It did. I gave notice at the apartment and boxed my life again, but this time with a different rhythm. I let go of things that felt like obligations to the old house and kept what felt like marrow. The good dishes came out of their sleeves and into my everyday. The envelope went in a drawer I could still reach without seeing it every hour. The framed photo of the kids on Santa's lap found a spot where light would hit it at 9:15 a.m., the way Frank liked morning to find us. People showed up. Bea arrived with 2 choir altos and a roll of blue tape for labeling boxes. She directed traffic like a benevolent general in a fabulous hat. Gavin carried my heavier books with the ease of a man who understands leverage, both literal and financial. My neighbor from the apartment pressed a plant into my hands and said, "It survives anything except neglect." Sophie texted, "Can I come after practice? I want to see." Laura texted later, "We can swing by for an hour Saturday. No expectations, just hands." They came. Sophie and Nate hauled linens and made jokes about whose room at home had more dust bunnies. Laura took a breath in the doorway and touched the wall the way you do when you are trying to tell a house you come in peace. We did not talk about money. We talked about where the mug should go and whether the chair looked better by the window or at a brave angle, window 1. At the end, Laura stood in the yard looking at the empty planter and said, "You're going to put something there." "A yellow rose," I said. "The kind that does more than survive." Her mouth did an almost smile. "Send me a picture when it blooms." On Sunday, I bought a bare root Julia Child because the tag said buttery, disease-resistant, and what an aspiration for a rose. I planted it like planting a flag, hands cold, breath fogging. the earth giving that good sound when it accepts what you're trying to do. I watered it with the patience I am still learning. New life came small at first, like birds finding the feeder one by one. I walked a mile most mornings, up to the overlook where Skyline Ridge shows its shoulder. In March, I joined B's Thursday group. The altos pulled me in and tuned me like a guitar until I could find the third above without thinking. The librarian saved me new mysteries and insisted I check out a watercolor book where the author told me to let go of control, and I wrote in the margin, "Lady, I'm trying." I volunteered at the pantry that had sent me that ridiculous glossy invitation once. I stocked shelves and learned names and watched a line move faster when everybody did a small thing right. I practiced spending fun money without apology. Once a week, I took myself to the cafe with the heavy mugs and ordered something I couldn't pronounce, and then did. I bought the good sea salt instead of the cheap shaker. It turned my eggs into something confident. I drove to a greenhouse 20 miles out where the air smelled like dirt and promise, and bought herb starts because I have always liked the idea of flavor within reach. I liked watching the cashier write $3.99 on a little tag and feeling no need to send a screenshot to anyone. Payments arrived on time 3 months in a row. The nonprofit sent a certificate that said Chris and Laura had completed the first half of their class. It was printed on bright paper like a diploma from a gentler world. Alan forwarded it with a one-line note. Progress. I sat with that word a while. Some nights I believed it. Other nights I remembered the foreclosure letter and got an aftershock. Recovery is a body learning. It doesn't have to jump at every sound. Consequences found them gently and then not gently. In May, a for sale sign appeared on their lawn. "Market's hot," Chris told me in a message passed through council, as if this were about opportunity and not inevitability. They found a rental 10 blocks over with a backyard just big enough for a trampoline and a landlord who plows. Sophie switched bedrooms and wrote her new address on the covers of her notebooks like a declaration. Nate missed his old hoop and then found a new one where boys argued calls and learned to compromise because nobody wanted to take the ball and go home. I did not pay their deposit. I brought pizza with extra napkins and cut slices for teenagers who treat food like a mission. The day the movers loaded their last box, Laura texted me a picture of the hydrangeas without their house. "They look ridiculous," she wrote. I sent back a picture of my rose leafing out like a slow applause. "We look ridiculous while we figure it out," I wrote. "Then one day we look like we meant it." Summer arrived with its own math. Afternoons that climb into the 80s, nights that cool enough to open windows and let the world in. The rose threw its first bloom in late June, yellow like a small sun you could hold. I took a photo and didn't post it anywhere. I printed it and taped it inside the cabinet with the ugly storm watercolor. Progress and mess, side by side, the only gallery I curate. Sophie came one Friday in July with nail polish and a crisis about a boy who said he liked chill girls. We painted our toes the color of watermelon, and I told her, "Chill is a word people use when they want you smaller." Nate came the next week with a shoebox of baseball cards and a point to prove. We sorted out a system that satisfied his need for order and my need not to have the dining table disappear under someone else's history. Laura came one afternoon with muffins still warm and eyes that had learned something I don't need to rename. We sat on my small porch and watched the neighbor's cat make its route. "Is it awful that I like the smaller house?" she asked. Fewer rooms to vacuum means fewer rooms to feel guilty about not vacuuming. "It isn't awful," I said. "It might be true." We did not become best friends by montage. We became two women connected by blood and practice, learning a new language, word by word. Sometimes she forgot and sent me a text with a tone like a bill. Sometimes I forgot and reached for my purse when a story turned toward trouble. We corrected. We breathed. We started again. In August, APS called to say they were closing the file for now. "Compliance looks good," the voice said. "We can always reopen if needed, but we hope we don't." I wrote "closed for now" on a blue index card and tucked it away. Then I took my chair out to the little yard, put my feet in the grass, and read a book so good it made the rest of the street fade into soft. On a Saturday, with a sky so clear it looked ironed, I drove out toward the ridge with a thermos of coffee and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, because presentation matters to morale. The trailhead is 3.2 miles from my door. I know this because I walk it when my mind tries to become a committee. I hiked until the city made a quilt beneath me and the air went thin enough to widen my thoughts. At the overlook, I took out my phone and wrote myself a note instead of taking a picture. You walked up here by yourself and also not by yourself. You brought everyone who loved you well and everyone who didn't, and a rose that learned your new address. On the way down, my phone buzzed. A text from Laura. Nate's game at 3 if you want to come. No pressure. Then a second, I mean it. I did too. I stopped by the cottage long enough to rinse my face, pat my hair into submission, and grab the good bleacher cushion because hard lessons deserve soft seats. I showed up and clapped for every kid, not just my kids' kids, and when Nate's team won by 3, I bought a round of lemon ices from the truck that smells like summer. That night, I cooked a dinner that would have made Frank whistle. Grilled chicken with lemon, new potatoes smashed and crisped, green beans snapped into a bowl that used to only come down for holidays. I set a place for me with the good plate and the good glass, and I lit a candle, not because anyone was watching, but because I like eating by light I made. After, I opened the drawer and took out the envelope. Its edges had softened from use. The tab still read, "Evidence" in block letters. The pink card still carried the first sentence that saved me. I added a new card, white for once because I had run out of color and also because sometimes plain is right. At the top I wrote, "Climax. Final terms inked. I moved and made a life I can live in." Under that, smaller. Peace isn't a gift they give you when they finally behave. It's a thing you plant, water, and then defend with a fence you don't apologize for. I dated it and slid it in, then closed the flap for the first time without the feeling that I was shutting a door on a fire. Before bed, I stepped outside to check the rose, even though it didn't need me. A breeze came up from the street like a sigh. Somewhere in the dark, a train stitched the edges of town together with its low note. I put my palm lightly against the cane and felt the life in it. Quiet, stubborn, busy with its own work. The kind of peace you earn one boundary, one payment, one new routine at a time, the kind you don't have to buy. By September, the cottage knew my footsteps. The floor in the kitchen gave a friendly little sigh where the rug refuses to lie flat. The back door stuck just enough that I learned the exact tug to coax it open with one hand and a bowl of herbs in the other. The rose, my Julia, threw a second wave of blooms as if to say, "You kept watering." I kept going. Look at us. The envelope lived in the drawer now instead of on the table. I liked knowing it was close without letting it set the table for every meal. Still, I took it out on the first cool evening of the month and laid it beside a stack of paper I'd been saving. The stack was labeled letters. Not legal, personal, not demands, declarations. When I started this season, words were the raft I clung to. Now they felt like a way of leaving something better than a mess behind me. I started with the one that had waited the longest. Dear Frank, I planted a yellow rose you would have teased for being fancier than we are. It blooms like butter coins, and I always think you've stepped out onto the patio to admire it whether you're here or not. The cottage fits me. One chair feels like a choice, not a lack. I still cook too much and eat leftovers cold at the sink sometimes because defiance tastes good now and then. I sing on Thursdays with women who shape notes like bread dough. I am okay in the ways you would measure and in a few you forgot to teach me because you didn't think you'd have to go first. I did some hard things this year. I hired help and let the help help. I said no and lived to tell it. I learned to call water water and not a favor. I didn't save everyone. I saved the person who could still use the life. There's a girl your granddaughter age who stands next to me in the alto section and drops her jaw, exactly like your mother did. I think about DNA and learned behavior and the way we smuggle habits into each other's pockets without meaning harm. I hope I am passing along at least one good habit, that love without a bill attached is possible and sturdy. I miss you when the kettle clicks off. I miss you when the car does that small shiver at a red light. I miss you when the list gets long, and I look for the person who used to say, "Okay, let's just start." But darling, I did start. I'm still going. Consider this a progress report. I kept us. All my stubborn M. I set that one aside with the dignity it deserved and picked up the envelope for the agency letter I had promised to write someday. I wasn't sending it now. The plan still had years to run. But words drafted early can save a shaky hand later. To whom it may concern, at Adult Protective Services, this letter will be provided upon full completion of the stipulated civil agreement between myself, Laura, last name, and Chris, last name. If you are reading this, then they have met every payment deadline, completed the agreed third-party financial education, and honored the no-contact terms regarding money. I will consider the civil matter resolved to my satisfaction. I appreciate the safety net your office provided and the way accountability can coexist with a family's hope for repair. Respectfully, Marion Walker. I printed it and slid it into the back of the envelope like a promissory note to my calmer future self. The next letter felt like tacking a chart to a classroom wall. Dear Sophie and Nate, someday when you earn your first paycheck and it lands in your hand like it trusts you, you'll have choices. Money can be a megaphone or a muffler. It can say, "I matter," or it can keep a roof over the heads that do. I'm writing to say, aim for roofs. Aim for dinners that taste like work and laughter. Aim for "we can't afford it this month" and the patience that sentence teaches. If you ever need a ride to a boring class about budgets, I will bring snacks and the good pens. Here are a few things I learned too late and just in time. A boundary isn't a wall when you put a gate in it. Help, that requires secrecy, is often not help. If someone tells you they love you but all their verbs are send and cover, listen to the verbs. Also, I will always want to bake with you. I will die on the hill of room temperature butter. That is love too. All my flour-dusted heart, Grandma. I took a breath. The letter that waited next was not a legal document, not a speech, and not a confession. It was the truth laid out where we'd both be able to find it later. Dear Laura, when you were small, you put rocks in your pockets until your pants sagged and you walked like a little miner. I used to empty them in the laundry room and laugh and save the good ones. I think we both picked up some rocks lately that weren't ours. I am putting mine down. I will not rewrite the year to make it pretty. I won't use ugly to describe it either. We did some hard learning. I did mine with a lawyer, 2 index cards at a time. You did yours with a car title and a move, and a class you didn't want and took. I see your effort even when I don't see your reasons. I can love a person and not love their pattern. That sentence took me months to make honest in my mouth. It lives here now. I won't fund you. I won't fix you. I will show up for you in ways that warm the room without pulling the wiring from my own house. When you're angry, take your time. When you're ready, bring the kids to plant daffodils with me in October. We'll bury something small we can look for together in spring. I am your mother, not your bank. I am your mother, still. Mom, I sealed that one because it was meant to travel. Then I wrote one more. It was the first letter I addressed to myself without a joke at the top to make the medicine go down lighter. Dear Marion, if you're opening this, something shook you. The phone rang in the wrong tone, or a holiday arrived with hands out, or a kind of silence settled that reminded you of the apartment early on. Read this out loud. Stand up if you have to. You've learned that the body believes the mouth. You told the truth once and the sky didn't fall. It will not fall now. You can say, I'll think about it, and then do that thinking across 24 hours instead of 24 minutes. The kettle takes as long as it takes. You are allowed to let the water boil and cool and boil again. Call Alan if a letter has numbers in it. Call B if your breath shortens. Call Gavin if a form makes you itchy. Call the grandkids if you need proof that laughter happened after this and will happen again. Go outside. Touch the rose cane lightly to feel its life doing the patient work you cannot see. Water if needed. No more, no less. Make something ugly on purpose and keep it. That is practice for loving the imperfect. Go eat something with salt and heat and sit down while you do it. You did not earn peace by suffering. You are tending it. Keep going. Love. Me, I tuck that one in the drawer by the stove. Emergencies often happen in kitchens. This way, the right words would be within reach of the good spatula. By October, the air had opinions again. Evening slid into the 40s, and only the brave sat outside. The nonprofit emailed a mid-course certificate with both Laura and Chris's names. My phone chimed with the deposit on the first day of the month, 3 times in a row, then 4. Once the payment hit late on day 9, and my body lit up like a panel of alarms. When it cleared, I wrote a line on a white card. Trust the teeth in the order, not because the plan is perfect, but because it bites when it needs to. We reimagine the holidays without saying the word reimagined, because nobody wants a mission statement in a living room. I hosted a small November dinner the Sunday before Thanksgiving. 3 altos in hats, B's famous greens, Sophie's pies, Nate's appetite like a rumor come true. Laura came early and helped me set the table with the good plates as if good things were the point. We went around and said one sentence we were grateful for instead of listing nouns. Steady, I said. Beginnings, Laura said. Carbs, Nate said accurately. A college essay that didn't make me hate myself, Sophie said, and we all cheered like she dunked from the free throw line. After dessert, Laura handed me an envelope. For once, the paper did not make me brace. Inside was a letter written in her neat teacher's handwriting. Mom, I still don't like the word. Maybe I never will. But I know we pressed on you until your shape changed. I know you pressed back and we're all still here. We're building a different shape. It's smaller. I can carry it. Thank you for letting consequences be ours without turning into ice. Thank you for not rescuing us from the lessons we paid for with our choices. Thank you for still making the sweet potatoes the way you do. Love, L. I didn't say anything for a whole minute, which you know is not my usual. Then I did the brave thing and didn't make a joke. Thank you, I said, and because gratitude needs somewhere to sit, I took her hand. December came early and late like it always does. Choir rehearsals doubled. B's hats got more festive. The pantry needed more volunteers and more pasta and then more volunteers again. I bought a wreath that smelled like a memory and hung it on the south-facing door where the sun could find it at 9:15 a.m. and make the ribbon look more expensive than it was. One afternoon, Sophie texted from a coffee shop. Do you think love is a decision or a feeling? I wrote back. Yes. Then I added, if anyone tries to make you choose, ask what they're selling. She sent back a picture of a latte with a heart in the foam and the caption, not falling for it. And I laughed in my kitchen all alone the way you do when alone isn't a problem. In January, 1 year after the courthouse day, the magistrate's office sent a form letter reminding all parties of milestones. I read it without shaking. I put it in the envelope and didn't feel like I was feeding the beast. I felt like I was filing a recipe I know by heart. Winter did what winter does. The rose slept with its bones showing. The cottage creaked in cold the way old things do when they're honest. I added soup to my list of competencies and learned that a bay leaf really does matter. I visited the Overlook on days when the sky was so clear you could see the city's seams and thought about how many lives fit between the post office and the grocery store and the choir room and the court. Ordinary geography, hard-won peace. On a wet day in March, a letter arrived from APS. It said, no further action at this time. File remains closed pending continued compliance. The phrase, "at this time," used to make me itch. Now it felt like weather. Forecast, not fate. I put the letter behind my drafted restorative one and closed the envelope with a smooth hand. Spring winked. The rose cracked small green at the joints. I dug a trench and tucked in a row of daffodil bulbs the color of butter dishes in old kitchens. I left little flat stones over each spot, so the squirrels knew this was a sacred experiment, not a buffet. Laura and the kids came with plastic trowels that weren't needed but looked festive. We got mud under our fingernails. We laughed about the way hope makes you willing to look silly in a yard. And then, one blue afternoon made of birdsong and ordinary errands, I took the envelope out to the table, not because a crisis had knocked, but because the drawer felt heavier than it needs to. I flipped through the cards. Pink, blue, green, purple, white. They told a story of a year I'd lived all the way. I added one last card and chose no color on purpose. I wrote, "Resolution, love with boundaries, a retirement that belongs to me, not a victory lap, a walking pace I can keep." Under it, I copied out what my life had turned it into. Payments arrive or they don't, and either way, I stay me. The kids know where the flower is. Laura and I are learning to be women together as well as mother and daughter. The rose is not dramatic, it just works. I slid the new card in, pressed the envelope flat, and then, because some endings are a kind of beginning, I put a rubber band around the whole thing and stood up. I walked it to the linen closet and set it on the top shelf next to extra quilts and the good tablecloth. Not banished, not altar, archive. Dinner that night was small and good. Eggs with chives, toast with butter the exact right temperature, strawberries sliced into a bowl that used to require a company to leave the cupboard. I ate sitting down, candle lit because I wanted to see my own face in kind light. When I was done, I washed the plate slowly, left it to dry, and stepped out the back door with my mug. The air had warmed into the high 50s, the kind of evening that makes the neighborhood dog walkers linger. Somewhere a kid practiced trumpet, somewhere a train stitched town to town. I knelt by the rose and touched the closest cane with the back of my fingers. Life under bark agreed. Still here, still at it. There's a number you can call in emergencies, and I honor that. There's also a number you learn that isn't digits but a sum, the count of choices you can live with. Mine fits on one hand now, and it is enough. Tell the truth, feed yourself, keep the gate in the fence, write it down, and, as Frank used to say when the lists got long, start. I started. I kept going. I will keep going tomorrow. And in the morning, if the light hits the south door just right at 9:15, it will find me at the table, not waiting for the world to become safe, but living like it already is in the space I can reach. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.